Welcome back to the Freelancers Tea Break, the short and sweet podcast that you can enjoy whilst you're making a cuppa. I'm Emma Cossey, a coach for freelancers, and I'm here to chat to you about tips, tricks, and advice for freelancers. This week, we've got a special guest, a very special guest, freelance royalty, I would say. We've got Sophie Cross, who, if you are a freelancer, there's a very good chance you've come across Freelancer Magazine. And Sophie is the brains and brawns behind it, basically. She came up with the concept and she's done incredible work with it. And it's just, from what I've seen from an outsider, it's just grown and grown. So when I had the opportunity to get Sophie on the podcast, I jumped at it, and I think you're all going to really enjoy this chat. So Sophie, I'm going to pass over to you first. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your freelance journey? Because I know you've been doing it for quite a while.
Sure. Oh, thank you for that lovely intro. Yeah, so I've been freelance 10 years now. Nearly exactly, I know, because I got my rescue dog 10 years ago in June. So I know, like, that was one of my big incentives. And I started off, I always just wanted my own business. And it seemed, one day I had the kind of light bulb idea that actually going freelance as a marketer, which was what I was in a corporate role in marketing, hospitality marketing, would actually be a really good way to have my own business, because I had the skills and also the startup costs were low. So the risk felt, lower than, all my pipe dreams of having restaurants and cafes and all the other business ideas I had. So I started that, and I was lucky enough to take on a lot of ex-employers or people that I'd used to work with and had moved on to other businesses. Maybe they became my clients. So I had quite a lot of big clients. I didn't really appreciate it at the time. I think because I'd come from quite big corporate names like Hilton and Merlin, I didn't kind of realize that it was quite impressive to be working for these brands from an outsider's perspective, because I actually kind of craved not working for big corporates anymore, which is always the way, isn't it? But then, careful what you wish for, because in the pandemic that came true. And, I was kind of still working for lots of travel and hospitality clients and had some really nice work. Actually, I'd moved more into copywriting and content, because that was just largely what I was being asked to do from my work. The people I used to work with knew that I think my writing was quite strong, and I'd ended up, those are the projects I kind of enjoyed doing, like web copy and brochures and things like that. You don't realize it at the time until you look back and join up the dots and go, oh, I loved creating hotel brochures, and now I make a magazine, and maybe there's not a million miles difference in that. So yeah, I lost all my clients in the pandemic, and we just moved back to London from Exmoor, and I was kind of determined to, I was like raring to go, and the pandemic happened a month later. Lots of people have similar stories, I know. And I started making marketing courses online, and I kind of knew that I could either target them at hospitality industry, which didn't seem like a very good idea at the time because they had quite a lot on their plate, but didn't think they would probably really be after marketing courses when they were just, worried about how they would ever survive. So I decided to target them at like freelancers and small businesses, because I was already part of a lot of freelance communities on Twitter. And, it was something I felt like the other industry I felt like I knew about, like how to market yourself as a freelancer. And off the back of those courses, the idea for Freelancer Magazine came about. I think because it was the pandemic, we were all online so much. We were all kind of like sharing content, and, it was really a time, like a real high point for community. So yeah, I just realized there wasn't a Freelancer Magazine, and I knew that I would know about it if there was one. And I thought it would be a really great way to start sharing more content. Like, the magazine is quite focused around, not solely, but we do kind of go a lot about how to market yourself and sharing people's stories and knowledge and kind of mistakes people have made, or best practice, for want of a better phrase. So yeah, the magazine was born in 2021. So I came up with the idea actually on New Year's Day, 2021. We started the Kickstarter in February. The Kickstarter ended on April the 1st, and the first issue launched by the end of April 2021. So we've just had our second anniversary issue, and it's quarterly. So that was issue 9. Yeah, that's my journey.
It's incredible, because I think I went through a stage of very much not reading magazines. I've read loads during my teenage years. But then in the last, I'd say like 4 or 5 years, there's been such a surge in kind of beautiful indie magazines that are just even the quality of the paper, and they're just such a joy to read. And it kind of seemed like you came along, perfect kind of topic. in that kind of indie magazine. I don't know if you would call it probably is called something different,
sure.
but it's such a beautiful magazine as well, and so well thought out. And it's nice also, there's a little bit of advertising in there, but it's not like overwhelming. Like, you know, sometimes you pick up Vogue or whatever and it's like 100 pages of adverts. This feels all like it works very well in terms of the balance between the editorial and the adverts and the things like that. Was the plan always to make it an actual printed one or digital or both?
So yeah, it was always going to be print first. It doesn't make sense for us not to have a digital version because, you know, you've obviously already got the files and it's just easier to distribute to if people want it, especially if they're kind of abroad, or lots of people want it if they want to have access to it the whole time. We actually do, we just launched our new website and we actually do have a print and digital version, like print and digital option now. So people can have both for a discounted rate. But yeah, I guess the idea was I felt really overwhelmed with being online. You know, I try my best to get away from it as much as possible. And, you know, I just knew that kind of creating content as blogs was not going to be anywhere near as appealing for people. And I just loved this idea that people would receive it through the door. They would kind of feel part of a club just by receiving it because they would know that other people were receiving it. And I kind of remember getting the Fun Day Times as a child and having that feeling. And yeah, that people could just take a bit of time out to actually digest it and, you know, go to a cafe. And I love seeing all those photos of people who are like, oh, I've got it on my train journey, or I've taken it to a cafe, or I've got it at the beach. And, you know, you're not there. And, you know, if we published it all kind of as blogs or something, it just wouldn't be anywhere near as engaging. You know, Ange Lyons is our designer and she does an amazing job of designing it. And we get that feedback about the advertising a lot as well, that actually like they feel like part of a magazine. And actually it's because a lot of people that advertise are readers, are freelancers. And I think the artwork is consistently good from the ads as well, because people get it. They get the kind of, it's kind of funny. It's kind of like the feedback you didn't expect to get, but it's often like one of, you know, people say to us, oh, I read the ads too. Like,
yeah,
it's like such a good compliment, I think, and one that I never really expected to get.
I suppose it's the nice thing about having such a specialist magazine is, you know, that the ads are going to be something that very much appeal to people. So it just becomes something that complements all the other content. But yeah, I completely agree. I always read the ads. Yeah. And it's always fascinating. I also think one of the nice things about the magazine is you're very much, although it is designed, I think, to take time away from online, you seem to be very good as well about integrating a lot of like making sure everyone's usernames are in there and where people can follow them on Instagram. So it doesn't just feel like you're reading it and leaving it. It feels like the conversation then carries on online when you want to go back.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, that was very intentional that we wanted to connect people. And it's silly, but I think I overthink things massively. And, you know, you realize that actually just including stuff like that, like someone's handle or where you find them at the end of their newsletter. Obviously, we want to do that for the people that we're featuring anyway, because they're giving up time and they're giving up, you know, they're sharing their stories generously. So it's nice from that aspect. But, you know, again, one of the best things is just hearing people go, oh, you know, and we connected after I read your story in the magazine. And then people go on to have relationships or start to work together. But yeah, and it's just kind of quite simple, really, you know, these kind of little things. But yeah, some stuff that probably in the past I would have massively overthought. And then it's like, oh, this is how, you know, you connect a community, because basically a community is not you broadcasting to people, and it's not even a two-way conversation. It's connecting the people within the community to each other. And that's just one of like the real simple ways I think we can do it.
It definitely has a very collaborative vibe. It definitely feels like that. So what were kind of your biggest learning curves when it comes to launching and running a magazine?
I think it's my dream business, you know, it really is. And, you know, there's a lot of kind of, I guess there's kind of two camps, and I think it depends on the business that you have, you know, but I think there's two camps of like whether you should sort of follow your passions and things like that, or they should be left as your passions. And I do think I just couldn't have done this if it wasn't my passion. Like I really couldn't have continued doing it, but because, you know, I already loved the communities that I was part of, and lots of those people kind of came in and joined the magazine community as well. I was already the person that was like, if you want to talk to me about setting up your business, if you want to talk to me about going freelance, I will be there. Like, get a glass of wine and let's talk about it. So just like I never get bored of hearing other people's stories and, yeah, so that's great. But so I would say it is hard though, it is really hard. I think it's relentless. The momentum, you have to keep up the momentum, and we're quarterly, which, I think at one point I did consider going monthly for about 5 seconds. And I'm like, I don't even know how people do it. Like, I really don't. And obviously we have it's 100 pages. So if it was more often, we would have less pages, but I think it's nice because then you get the breadth of the content in one go. If it was a 20 pager and we also don't have to worry too much about being topical because it's quarterly. So it's more kind of like a resource that you could keep on your bookshelf. It's quite timeless, but we have the Dunker newsletter that we can be a bit more topical with. Yeah, I think in some respects it's turning these things into a positive because it's kind of helpful to have that momentum. It's kind of helpful to keep going. I've just learnt so many things. Like, it's amazing now to have a team. I basically wrote most of the first 4 issues myself. That isn't sustainable. And I don't know how I did it looking back now. But so I suppose, one of the main lessons I've learned about business is like, you just can't do it all yourself. And the more you can start to kind of outsource little bits, it's such a hard balancing act, from a cash flow perspective, but also from a trial and error, getting it right, what you need to outsource. But, they sort of say you should only be doing the tasks that really kind of you add the most value to. So I think it is true. If you can start outsourcing things like, as a freelancer, I always had an accountant and things like that. But yeah, from the magazine, obviously it just wasn't possible for me to do everything. So I think this is one of the biggest learning curves, is like how to get comfortable with outsourcing and how that process works best. You have to almost work out the process yourself first before you can pass it on to somebody else. So, but it is also amazing to work with other people. I probably didn't think that, it was possible to get so much enjoyment out of like having a team. I always thought I was like quite a bad man, like I would be quite a bad manager. But yeah, it's awesome. And it's awesome to like be paying other people, and things like that. Like, that's such a nice incentive to kind of scale as well.
Yeah. And I think you've worked with, because I know Ange was on one of our like collaboration episodes a few months ago, but I think you guys have worked together almost since the start.
So yeah, I told her, I think the day after I came up with the idea, I texted her and said, do you want to make a magazine with me? And she said yes. If it wasn't for her, it just would have been a complete non-starter because she was so supportive at the beginning. Like, we got the community really involved from day one. I didn't have this attitude of like, okay, let's keep it a secret until we've worked it out. I was like, let's just tell people. And it was really nice because then people got involved, and they chose what they wanted the brand to look like and yeah, all sorts of things. Like, before we launched the Kickstarter, we started building the database that way. But yeah, if it hadn't been for Ange kind of getting on board and saying, yeah, like, I'll support you from the beginning. We'd also made a magazine together before. So we'd made a magazine for the Big Hotel Group, and that got pulled in the pandemic. But we hadn't actually met in person before Freelancer Magazine. So it was really nice. We'd worked together for maybe like 2 years, but I was actually based in Somerset at the time, but I just moved back to London. So just before we launched the Kickstarter, like, I went up to meet her and we made a little video, like, to be part of the Kickstarter video. And yeah, it's just been incredible. Like, it's been amazing working with her on this. And, she always calls me like Sophie, no amends Cross, because I just kind of leave it up to her from a design perspective, because I just think she does such an awesome job on it. So yeah, I think she likes it as well. So that's good.
Sounds like a dream client, to be honest. No amends. That's awesome. So you touched on the writing side. Now, I know some of the people who are listening to this are potentially writers or would just love to write a piece. So do you have any kind of tips for people who might want to pitch an article or an idea?
Yeah, sure. We actually do have a submissions form now. We launched our new website a few weeks ago, and under the community page, there is a submissions form, which is just really, I think it's also important for us, because if people can't it's going to sound really bad, but if people can't be bothered to fill a form in, then that's kind of a first, like, deal breaker for us. I suppose we have focused more on building an editorial team. So we don't take, like, the magazine is more based around that than having like lots of submissions, but that's not to say that we don't ever accept them. I'd say my perspective as an editor is always what's best for the reader. So if you're going to come in and sell an idea and it starts with me, and I think, I'd love to have my story published, that's kind of almost like an automatic no for me, because I know that your first priority isn't the reader and what would be helpful to the reader. So I would say, think about it from the reader's perspective, and also, read a copy of the magazine. I do, amazingly or not, I do get quite a lot of people go, almost try and dangle it as a carrot for me to say, if you let me submit, believe it or not, I think it's but a bit if you let me submit, I'll buy, I'll read the magazine. And I'm like,
wow.
Yeah, it doesn't, I'm like, yeah, that's okay. But, I just feel like the people that we have accepted as writers, and, some of whom are now part of the team, are people that get it. They really get the magazine, and they, that is demonstrated through, that's what I would say. And I would say, I know what it's like from an outsider's perspective. I know what it's like pitching. I know that before I had this perspective, I would have made some real schoolboy errors, and really kind of embarrassed myself. And it's it's not until you're kind of on the other side of it that you really do realize. And I suppose now it's quite nice because I have the perspective of being a freelancer, but also having, I am also a client for other people, but then I have clients and things like that. And I also get to hear millions of other freelancer stories. So I have kind of all this knowledge now that's kind of quite a unique position. But I understand before I had that, I was making quite a lot of boo-boos. So I get that I've probably done the same things. But yeah, I would say that is probably what most editors are looking for. Just that you have, and also look at the features they have. All of our features are pretty much regular. So we're going to be looking for content around, and that just instantly demonstrates that you've got knowledge of the publication. If you're I see that you've got this 3 tips micro column. I think that these tips would be really good for your reader. So yeah, I would say those are probably my top tips. We also have you dig on the website a little bit and say on our advertising pages, we have the upcoming themes. I'm not sure if we have them on the submissions form too. But yeah, if you can just do a little bit of groundwork like that, so it just shows, okay, I've actually thought about this. And yeah, you're thinking put the reader first, not yourself first, then that's a really good start, I'd say.
I think it's on the last page of your magazine as well, the printed one, isn't it? Where you've got what to expect in the next issue.
Yes,
is that right?
It is, yes. And actually probably to think a couple of issues ahead is maybe we're quarterly, so, but by the time 9 is launched, we've already finalized a lot of our content for 10. Amazingly enough. So we're kind of now, I would be looking at ideas for 11 and 12 and kind of would already have things in place. But yeah, I would say we still would have some gaps for 10, but yeah, definitely look at what features already exist and, what features have different people writing them each month, each quarter, because those are the ones, we're probably looking for people for.
Awesome. What's been your proudest moment with the magazine?
I think having the team meetings now, to kind of be on a Zoom team meeting with a few other people. And also we have virtual co-working. So we have volunteer virtual co-working hosts. So we hosted our first Zoom catch up for those hosts yesterday. And I think to be on a Zoom call, and have people that just to have people around that have kind of are supporting or are working, with the community that kind of really believe in what we're doing and that, help taking it to the next level. And next week, I'm doing a roadshow, a UK, it's England based roadshow. So yeah, it starts next week and we're going to go to lots of different locations. And then we've got a Brighton date in June and I think we'll be in Edinburgh in August. So I think there's quite a small number of us, but we're sort of going Liverpool, Bradford, Exeter. And we might have about 10 at each one. I think London's going to be quite a big date. We might get kind of 30 at that. But I just sort of thought, wow, how amazing to, go to Bradford and be able to get 10 people that love your magazine and love the community and want to meet other people and want to be part of it. So yeah, I think just connecting people and it's really touching to have like the support of people, and whatever that looks like, whether that's people like sharing about the virtual co-working afterwards, or, you know, opportunities like this, talk about it. It's just like been mind blowing.
It's not just a magazine anymore. It's literally a movement with you moving all over the UK.
Yeah, it is. And funnily enough, if you subscribe by the new website, we have a membership area dedicated for subscribers now. So there's like some additional things that you get exclusively for subscribers. So you'll get like access to some events first, discounted tickets for like our Christmas party. You'll get some exclusive content, merch, like discounted advertising, things like that. But we called that area the movement. And my husband actually said to me, I was like, I really want to think of a name for it. Like, you know, people can kind of feel part of over time. And I was like, I've got it. I think I want to call it the movement, because also like music is quite a big thing for us, and like, you know, hosting parties and things. He was like, oh, I think it sounds a bit political. And I was like, perfect. And he was like, I think you might need to soften it a bit. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I've put a Madagascar, I like to move it gif at the top of the page. Like, is that softened enough?
Perfect.
And he was like, yeah. So yeah.
Everything's improved with gifs.
Yeah, especially Madagascar ones. So, yeah, it's kind of nice that we're taking on that theme of movement. And yeah, hopefully we are a big part of this kind of freelance movement that's happening. You know, freelance is the future of all of this, and contributing to, you know, helping people grow freelance businesses that they love, and supporting people kind of do that in whichever way is right for them. Yeah.
And I think one of the few benefits of COVID and lockdown is that it forced more companies to embrace a more remote approach. And I think that's opened up a lot of opportunities for freelancers. So it can only keep growing.
Definitely.
And almost like working to your strengths, which we were kind of saying about earlier. Freelancing allows you to do that so that people can work with specialists rather than hire someone 9 to 5 who might be doing lots of jobs. You can hire several freelancers doing less hours, but more specialized work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just from an employer perspective, there's probably a lot of like a big education piece around, you know, how it's best to work with freelancers. But what I and the magazine really believes in, and, you know, I think sort of launching the new website and having this movement area kind of, which is small at the moment, you know, I guess people aren't really using it too much at the moment, but, you know, it really struck me that it kind of goes back to like the proudest thing being the people. It is the power of connecting people, you know, especially freelancers who, you know, I did it for years, for probably 6 or 7 years, maybe a bit less, 5 or 6 years, was just working in a really isolated way, you know, only really had contact with my clients. So I had like nothing, like no benchmark, nothing to compare to, no kind of support or friendships. And actually, like the friendships I've made through the freelance communities are so much stronger than maybe friendships people that I used to see in the office every day. You know, it's like you really can find a bunch of like-minded people, and just people that are so generous. You know, it will really shock you at first. Like, you know, it really is collaboration over competition. So, you know, that is 100% what I'm here for. And also helping freelancers to see themselves as businesses. I think that is really important. And, you know, that whatever that looks like to you, but just kind of think it just even helps to create like a bit of separation as well between your personal life and your work life, and boundaries. We were talking about it before the podcast slightly, weren't we? Like boundaries and routines.
Yeah.
Easy to give the advice, you know, it's easy to give the advice, isn't it?
Yes, unfortunately, feelings and emotions and moods annoyingly muddy the water on that front. But yeah, no, it is very important. Funny enough, I saw a TikTok earlier actually, which was saying about how people make all these friendships through their workplace, and then someone popped up with a stitch and was like, yeah, it's a shared trauma of working together. That's why they're friends. That's like the best friends are the ones that you worked with in really terrible places. Whereas I think freelance friendships are not from like shared trauma. They're from shared passion, shared interest, shared loving what we do. And yeah, the challenge is, but we are so much stronger when we all do support each other rather than, like you say, I've always said about the collaborate rather than compete, because the freelance industry is just, it's not like that. It's not like people are trying to like stab each other in the back to get up to the next level. I think everybody knows that there's clients enough for everybody and we all have to find our own ways to work.
Yeah. A rising tide lifts all boats, they say, don't they?
Exactly.
So, yeah. I mean, I have a couple of real good friends from my corporate days, like long term, who've become actually my very best friends. But I feel like by and large, you know, when you choose to kind of socialize or connect with people in the freelance communities, it's kind of out of choice. Whereas when you were in corporate, I was in corporate employment, you were kind of forced together. And actually we were kind of so miserable that we would just go to the pub every night and just spend our money drinking, bitching about work. And it just seemed nuts. I was sat in the pub with my little sister the other day. She's like nearly 20 years younger than me. And, you know, it was like we were about to go to Hamilton, the musical, but we were sat in a pub in Victoria at kind of 5 o'clock on I don't know what day it was, Tuesday. And she was just like, God, like these people look so miserable. And I was like, yeah, one of my kind of pieces of advice would probably be like, if you get an office role, for instance, don't spend the time after work in the pub with the same people just moaning about work, because that's all you've kind of got in common. You know, you're not, but actually, oh my God, like with the freelance communities, people are like meeting up to go on hikes together. And, you know, the Being Freelance community is amazing. They have this amazing circle platform now. And then they had a meet up in London the other day, which was crazy golf. You know, we just do all sorts of things like this. And, you know, obviously like we take work seriously as well, because I think freelancers do, like we have to, right? There's nowhere to hide, but, you know, I believe that we can have a lot of fun with it too. And we get to choose a lot of what that looks like, and we shouldn't forget that.
Yeah. Why be a bad boss to yourself and not allow yourself to do these fun things? Be a better boss.
Yes, for sure. It's funny that, I think someone said that to me a year or so ago, was like, why do we tolerate the things when we're a boss to ourselves that we wouldn't tolerate off like a boss in employment? And it's like, oh my God. Yeah. Like if your boss was like, right, you have to work until 7 o'clock at night, or you can't take a holiday, or all this, like we would be like up in arms about it, wouldn't we? But yeah, it's always a good mantra to remember, I think, like be a better boss to yourself.
That's what we need to do about the holidays. When we go on holiday, instead of feeling like, oh, I should be working, we should be good bossing ourselves and saying, like, I do think that is something that it was easier to switch off. I mean, you would still come back to a mountain, but you know, it would kind of like, you would be able to switch off entirely. And like I said to you before this recording, I put my out of office on for the first time in like 10 years for the holiday I've just taken. I just have generally always found it more stressful not to. And I still check in, you know, but I just decided this time I was going to put an out of office on to say, you know, it's going to be a while till you get a response from me. But yeah, which was nice, but comes with its own anxiety when you get back, I suppose. Yes, that good old inbox.
Mm.
Right. So where can we find you online?
So I'm a LinkedIn geek.
You are so good on LinkedIn.
A few years ago, I didn't think I would be saying this, but yeah, I'm a LinkedIn geek. So like my URL is /Sophie Cross, but I think if you type in Sophie Cross, you'll find me on LinkedIn, and that's probably the best place to connect. Like, drop me a DM, say you heard this podcast, and yeah, I would love to chat and be connected.
What I'll do is I'll put in the notes, I'll put the website, the Dunker newsletter, because that's always really interesting. And I love that you kind of do the bullet point links, so it's not too overwhelming as well. It's something you can take away something quite easily.
Yeah, I've got to go and finish that actually. But it drops at 4 p.m. every Thursday, so I've got to go and finish this week's Dunker. But yeah, we have a newsletter especially for freelancers, and freelancermagazine.co.uk has everything: events, courses, the magazine, the Dunker sign up, resources, free resources. So yeah, check it out. But yeah, drop me a connection on LinkedIn and that'd be awesome.
Perfect.'t you so much for coming on. I would urge everybody to check out the magazine. I think, is it out this month? Is there another one?
It's out now. Yeah, it just started landing last week. So
yeah, I think I'm one of the later in the month ones, so it should be a little bit later soon. But I have like a magazine in most of the rooms now, because you've released enough that I've got them in most of the rooms somewhere. And when my husband found out, I would have been, because I had the top 3 tips, one bit in there.
Yes.
He had it all printed out and put into a frame for me. So that's up on my little office wall. But yeah, it's a wonderful magazine and I love what you're doing. So, and good luck with the tour. I hope it goes really well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your support in every way.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Freelancers Tea Break. I hope you found it useful. If you want to connect with other freelancers, do come join us in the Facebook group, The Freelance Lifestylers. It's completely free and really lovely and supportive. You can also find out more information on freelancing at freelancelifestyle.co.uk. And as always, I'd really appreciate it if you were able to take a moment to leave a review on the podcast platform of your choice.